Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. And good morning, everyone. I'm James Wang, and Chinese name is Wang Qingjie. And it's my pleasure and great honor to be invited to give a speech to the 9th International Conference of the Eastern Philosophy at the Unicamp. As Robin just said that she already go to your conference for 3 times. I have never been there. I would like to say sorry. It's a pity I cannot come this time due to my very busy schedule this month. So I hope that in the future, I will come and meet you offline in person. Okay. And I would like also express my gratitude to the conference organizers, especially Professor Antonio Nito, for your kind invitation. The main theme of the conference is human rights from non-Western perspective. As Robin just said, she addressed this issue from a Taoist perspective, and I will bring an issue or address this issue from a Confucian perspective. So the title of my talk today is Symmetrical Justice and Harmonious Justice from a Confucian perspective. So in the following, I'm going to share with you the screen. Let's see, I could do it. Okay. The symmetrical justice and harmonious justice from a Confucian perspective. Yeah. So I'm going to divide the whole part of my speech in the 5 parts. I'm going to pick up one central issue for Confucian philosophy or Confucian morality, the filial piety. I'm going to talk about it and to see how can we justify filial justice. Yeah, that is usually we say it's the sons or the grown sons' moral obligation to take good care of their aged parents. I just use this case to discuss about Confucian concept of justice. So in the first part, I'm going to talk about this Confucian concept and also talk a little bit about this maybe the policy, why in Chinese law, for example, or among Chinese, we taken the more obligation to take the filial obligation to take care of our old parents or aged parents, and not only as a moral duty, but also as a legal duty. And the second part, I'm going to discuss about the American philosopher, that's Norman Daniels. He made a challenge against this Confucian concept of filial justice. His argument by saying that this between the parental obligation and the filial obligation, there is a asymmetry or injustice caused by this asymmetry. So that's I'm going to respond to this challenge with 2 arguments from Confucian perspective. And the third part, I'm going to make distinction between Confucian concept of harmony and use that to replace this Western liberal vocabulary of symmetrical asymmetry, this kind of dichotomy. And then I will say the Confucian concept of justice will not be derived from this quantitative concept of symmetry or asymmetry, but from harmony. And also based on this, I'm going to explain a little bit more about Confucian concept of justice, that's a yi, and its relationship between Confucian understanding of the ground of morality. And finally, in the fifth part of my speech, I'm going to say that this kind of Confucian concept of justice does not neglect or deny or reject the individual self, or concept of individual, or the individual justice, or the concept of self, but instead it actually is trying to develop an idea of the Confucian concept of self, or that start from this idea of xiao as a self-accomplishment or self-realization. So that's a basic idea I'm going to discuss today. Let's start with this analysis of Confucian concept of filial piety. According to Confucian understanding, the filial piety should be understood as an absolute primary virtue for Confucianism, almost accepted by all Confucians. For example, in the Annex, the chapter 1, section 2, we see this. They call that as the root of morality. Yeah, so that's a virtue of filial piety, which primarily defines children's moral duty to their parents, has been understood in the 2,500 years old Confucian tradition as a root of morality in China. This idea also, let's say, accepted by, or if we read the Max Weber's, you can see the Max Weber also say the similar things. He said, quote, the absolute primary virtue, which in case of conflict precede all other virtues in China. So that's the Max Weber's saying. So what is the Confucian concept of filial piety? Usually scholars say that there should be at least 3 important meanings of Confucian term filial piety, or xiao, in Annex. Here I listed 3 major terms. The first one called lenya, that is adult children's willing and being able to take respectful care of their aged parents. So that's in Chinese concept we call yang. You can find that in the Annex chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 4, and chapter 17. That's the reference we can see. I'm not going to just saying that or repeat that by looking at the text. The second, it means wu wei, one's compliance with way of or never disobedience to the will of one's father, because the father should be seen as a symbol of authority in the familiar community and in the tradition. We can also find that in Annex, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 4, 13, and 19. The third concept here is 始于有正, that is to extend one's exercise of filial piety from family life to public and governmental service. We can find that in chapter 1, chapter 2, these 2 chapters, we can find this. But because Confucian concept of xiao, or filial piety, is a very rich concept. You can see these 3 main regions it covers. So, but today I'm going to focus just on the first one. This is nenya, that's taking respectful or taking good care of one's Asian parents. Is that just or unjust? So that we are going to focus on this. Among these 3 meanings of Confucian's xiao, the first meaning, taking respectful care of one's Asian parents, is the most naturalistic and fundamental. Yeah. So we are going to talk about that. And into detail, when we talk about the yang, there are also three meanings. In the Annex, Confucius termed yang as taking respectful care of one's aging parents may be interpreted as, first, taking care of one's parents' life. In Chinese, we call yang kouqi. And second, take care of one's parents' mental needs and make them happy. That's in Chinese, we call yang ji. And third one, taking care of one's parents' spirit after they have died. In Chinese, we call yang ming. So that's three kind of things. Yeah. Of course, when we're talking about this social policy, we focus on first one, take care of one's parents' life, yang kouqi, and maybe the parents' mental needs. Okay. The Confucians' emphasis on the xiao or yang or jing as adult children taking respectful care of their aged parents has a tremendous influence in shaping the Chinese understanding of Confucian virtue as well as the very nature of morality. Taking good care of one's parents is thus not only seen as a cardinal virtue of a superior moral person, as expressed by Max Weber, but also being good citizen. So this Confucian tradition of seeing one's taking good care of their aged parents as a moral virtue, or even a man's duty, has also been reflected in Chinese law from the beginning, and in the Chinese concept of jing, as adult children taking respectful care of their aged parents. So you can see that's widely practiced in the Chinese society. Okay, now we turn to some kind of challenge made by Western liberal philosophers. Norman Daniels, a Russian liberal philosopher and once a US president advisor for public health policies. I think he served as advisor in the Clinton administration. Okay. Made a charge when considering the issue of adult children's obligation for caring of their aged parents in our modern society. According to Daniels, there are a basic asymmetry between parental and filial obligation. The parental obligation of caring for their young children, says Daniels, is self-imposed duty. That means, our parents, why parents have a moral obligation to take care of their young children? Because they bring the children to the world. So it's a self-imposed duty. While the so-called children's obligation of caring for their aged parents is a non-self-imposed and thus cannot be morally justified and required. So according to Daniels, that cannot be fully justified. Therefore, it's an injustice, unjust. So I have once developed two arguments in answering Daniels' challenge. First, I claimed that Daniels' criticism misunderstood the nature of children-parent relationship from its beginning. It should not be self-other relation that deals with the rights possessed by children on the one side and by parents on the other side. This is, I just mentioned that is one kind of dichotomy of the self and other, or symmetry, asymmetry, something like that. Okay. Daniels insists that the children have no consensual commitment to establishing such a filial relationship from the beginning, because one does not choose to be the son or the daughter of one's parents. And so-called filial relation is symmetrical. But my question is it really asymmetrical? It might be true that children do not give their consent in establishing the parent-children relationship. But it is also true that they do not give their consent not to establish such a relationship. Therefore, whether a child gives consent to being brought into the world or to establish a parent-children relationship is actually a fake or misleading question. So that's my first argument. It's a misleading question. A child as a moral agent in such a relationship does not exist at all. Moreover, even if such child does exist, it would be impossible for her either to give or to refuse to give consent in the first place, or to establish a parent-child relationship. So therefore, I call it's a misleading question. Thus understood, the right question should not be whether a child actually gave consent, but whether a child would consent if the child were a full-fledged human person. If we agree that life itself is the most valuable thing we have in the world, and that most children would have a normal family life, that is, they receive adequate care and love from their parents, we should say that a child would give a consent to or impose him or herself into a filial relation, and thus make it symmetrical. That's the first argument. The second argument comes from, I will say, the Confucian perspective, because the intergenerational justice of the Xiao. The second argument for the Confucian moral virtue of filial duty against Daniel's criticism is based on the Confucian concept of justice as appropriation, which includes not only the intersubjective relations, but also the intergenerational ones in a Confucian community and society. Daniel's bias may lead him to claim that a request for adult children's moral virtue of the taking respectful care of aged parents must be an unfair one for younger generation, because it asks the younger generation to make sacrifice for the well-being of the old generation. But my argument is like this. But if one, as Confucian often does, takes human life as organic whole and a dynamic process of birth, growing, flourishing, declining, and dying, then the rationale behind the Confucian concept of filial virtue as a young will become clearer. Nothing seems more natural and fair than having received care for our parents when we were young and reciprocating this care by taking care of our parents when they are old. So just like, the younger generation, it's not a relationship between a younger generation and old generation, because younger generation will become older, and then they will have their younger children to take care of them. So if this is a justice, if we really talk about this symmetry or asymmetry, it's still a symmetrical justice. That's my argument. Therefore, the charge of asymmetry or unfairness or inequality of Confucian filial virtue can only make sense on the assumption that individuals in our social and communal life must be seen as undifferentiated, colorless, and isolated social atoms. But for Confucian ethics, this assumption itself is questionable and unacceptable. It seems to me that this traditional idea of self-other symmetry or symmetry must be based on self-other dichotomy ontologically. If a comprehensive moral theory such as virtue ethics does not presuppose this dichotomy, the problem of self-other symmetry must then not bother us in a way such as in utilitarianism or in a moral consequentialism, as well as in liberal moral theory. So that's I try to develop the argument still within the vocabulary of symmetry or asymmetry, but now I try to switch to another framework. My above discussion and argument may indicate that a virtue ethic such as Confucian moral theory would claim the ascetic characters of moral superior man should have a deeper ontological ground than that of the self-other dichotomy, which belongs essentially still to a philosophical subjectivism or monistic individualism. Because of this, I should call it self-other harmony rather than self-other symmetry. I'm not going to use the word of symmetry, but instead I'm using the harmony. I will say that will reflect more of the Confucian understanding of the very nature of morality or the concept of justice. The Confucian concept of harmony has a much broader sense than the concept of self-other symmetry. Ontologically, it goes together with other Chinese philosophical categories such as qi, or yin-yang, or taiji, or tiandi, or chen, or zhongyong. So I'm not going to repeat this because Robin already talked enough about it. It is also morally and politically, on the level of morality and politics, associated with those cardinal and primary Confucian virtues such as ren, or benevolence, or love and care, or li, ceremony as a social rituals, and yi, justice as appropriation. Ontologically as well as morally, Confucian virtue ethics may not accept any a priori or metaphysical priority of individual rights, dignity, or interest of self and others, on which the so-called self-other symmetry could be established or acknowledged. However, if we say that individual rights, dignity, and interest, as well as all the virtue associated with them, can be derived, identified, respected, and protected symmetrically, this symmetry must depend ontologically on the deep level of harmony. So ontologically, I will say the concept of harmony may play much deeper role than the concept of symmetry. Of course, when we talk about harmony, we also not only ontological but also psychological harmony. This is ontological as well as psychological harmony among different but interactive tendencies such as Tian and Di, female and male, old and young, strong and weak, and positive and negative, one and many, and individual and community. So we use this, the framework. Okay, let's go further to analyze social and political virtue of justice as appropriation in Confucian virtue ethics and politics. I try to explore why and how virtue in Confucian virtue ethics comes out of conceptually much broader and ontologically much deeper notion of harmony rather than, as Daniel's once showed, merely out of concept of self-other symmetry. As some of us already know, the Confucian virtue of moral, social, and political justice, that's a yi, comes out of a multiple intra and interactive relations of self with others. However, here, the other is defined neither as any quantitative one, as we find in utilitarianism, nor as a single rationalized and thus dignified individual person, as we find in the Kantian deontology. So I try to make a distinction between Confucian concept of justice from the utilitarian or Kantian. Here I try to make distinction between with and between. Instead, I would like to stress that it is a relation of myself with others rather than a relation between the self and others. From the relation of with, we come to the concept of harmony or discord, while from the concept of between, we have the concept of symmetry or asymmetry. Now I'm going to talk a little bit more about Confucian concept or idea of qun or community. Moreover, Confucian would further understand the other with whom he or she coexists primarily as qun, that is, different family life circle communities and surrounding natural environments such as animal world or natural world, out of which I myself get at least partially identified as well as cultivated through way of emotionally loving and caring, and that of being cared. Now we will see these two very similar words we call the yi and the yi, or yi and I, let's see, by referring to a very famous Confucian who lived about 2,000 years ago. Yeah, and along with this, that's Dong Zongsu. Along with this way of self-identification and self-cultivation, a Confucian virtue of justice or righteousness, and a vice of injustice or non-righteousness, Gu get established and understood in the traditional Confucian virtue ethics. This is also why early Confucian philosophers, such as Dong Zongsu, defined the meaning of Chinese character yi, the justice or righteousness, from its two constituent parts as the personal self and my surrounding social, historical, and natural communities. For example, this character yi, you can see there are two parts. Dong Zongsu also interpreted this Confucian virtue of justice or righteousness philosophically from its homophone, appropriation, which we call, in Chinese, we call yi, in the following passage. Yi means yi, to one's own person. Only one is appropriate to his own person can this be called yi. Thus, the expression yi combines the notion of appropriateness, that's yi, and the personal self, 我, in one term. If we hold on to this insight, yi as an expression refers to personal self. Thus, it says that to realize yi in one action is called attaining it in oneself. That's in Chinese, we call 自得. Or neglect yi in one's action is called self-neglectness. That's a 自失. Yeah. So according to Dong and other Confucian during his time, during Dong Zongsu time, yi should be defined in terms of yi, which means right, proper, appropriate, and suitable. For example, in Zhongyong, the doctrine of Ming, we find this definition. Yi means yi, appropriation. In both classical and modern Chinese, the word yi often refers to one's making oneself over to become harmoniously appropriate to one's surrounding environments. That is one's familiar, social, and natural environment. It refers out to making one's surrounding environment harmoniously appropriate for one's self-attainment and self-accomplishment. Therefore, Dong's interpretation of yi in terms of yi indicate an interplay or dialectical interaction of yi with yi, of the personal self, 我, that's me, that's I, with my contextual and communal environment as 群 or yang, out of which my individual person reaches my identity realization and accomplishment. Therefore, the Confucian concept of justice as appropriation does not reject the rights or individual rights, but it's the ask for or call for this kind of realization or accomplishment of the individual itself. So let's come to my conclusion. Based on this conception of yi as justice and righteousness and the harmonious and caring interplay of my individual self with my surrounding communities, Confucians think that fulfill one's virtues such as being a lovely parent or taking good care of one's young children, and being a female son or daughter by taking respectful care of their parents when the parents are old, is simply part of the way of self-realization and of self-accomplishment. Failure to do this will be called 不义, non-righteousness or unjust. Our natural and innermost moral feeling of 羞, the shame, or 恶, dislike, or 不安, an uneasy mind, according to Confucians, that's Confucius and Mencius, are simply signal of both internal and social disapproval of this non-righteousness action, and thus marks the beginning of the development of righteousness and justice in Confucian tradition. The harmonious interplay of yi and with yi not only ask for yielding or sacrifice of myself to my surrounding and environmental communities in the way of appropriation, but also affirms my uniqueness in such appropriation. That includes my duty, privileges, and rights due to my specific situation in my surrounding communities. Thus understood, the Confucian virtue of moral and social justice and righteousness are not against the idea of equality and fairness among the members of the society. It is instead an affirmation of it if we consider it within a larger social and historical context. That's my speech. Thank you very much.
Shall I say good night? Is it Professor Wang?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me?
Good night. I hear you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your time, for your speech, and for your availability at this time. It's 10:30 in Macau. I presume you are in Macau, correct?
Yeah, it's almost 11 o'clock at night, but it's okay now.
Thank you very much. So I'll just give you a brief comment on your speech, and then I will open for questions from the audience here that will be eager to inquire about your presentation, okay?
Okay.
In fact, I'll speak in Portuguese, first of all, and then I'll turn up to English to make this comment. A gente inverteu aqui a ordem porque a palestra começou antes da apresentação do professor. Posso fazer aqui agora a apresentação do professor? Então, o professor James Wang, está escrito lá, PhD na Universidade de Tulane, dos Estados Unidos, e mestre pela Universidade de Pequim. Antes de ingressar na Universidade de Macau como professor ilustre de filosofia e estudos religiosos, lecionou filosofia em várias universidades nos Estados Unidos e na Universidade Chinesa de Hong Kong. É especialista em filosofias europeias contemporâneas, filosofias comparadas Oriente e Ocidente e filosofias morais. Seus interesses de pesquisa contemplam a filosofia europeia contemporânea, a filosofia hermenêutica de Heidegger, filosofia comparada Oriente e Ocidente, filosofia chinesa, ética e filosofia moral. Os cursos ministrados regularmente incluem hermenêutica filosófica, filosofia moral, filosofia de Heidegger, filosofia comparada Oriente e Ocidente, filosofia asiática, filosofia de vida, filosofia chinesa e sua cultura, a filosofia e os problemas contemporâneos e os clássicos filosóficos. Então, eu vou fazer só um comentário em inglês para que ele possa me seguir e depois a gente abre para discussões. Professor James, I'm coming to you back. Okay? I was just introducing you because we inverted here the order, and the introduction of yours was made subsequent to your presentation. Okay, we apologize for this. The speech, the title of the speech, o título era Justiça Simétrica e Justiça Harmoniosa na Concepção Confuciana de Piedade Filial. And it struck to me in the beginning when you said that to the question about the duties and the feelings from the children to the parents, they are not asked about whether they consent to that relationship, to that authority, but also that they do not say they do not consent. No? And it brings to my mind a certain idea of another English term beyond duties and rights, of imperative, which has both objective and subjective dimensions. I have in mind a word from the Indian philosophical tradition, which deals also and is usually translated as duties, which is the word dharma, which has perhaps better translated as imperative, because it has two basic dimensions, one objective, another subjective, but still it is not an intersubjective event per se. And therefore, the duties of one are not the rights of the other. but there is a more wider concept of community rights. That would fit much better, perhaps, in your understanding, when you move from a concept of symmetry, which would be based on the duties of one being the rights of the other, to a concept of harmony, when the rights which are at stake when one fulfills his duty are the rights of the community, not the rights of the one with which you intersubjectively deal with. So that's what came to my mind, and thank you very much for your speech. Okay? I'm going to open here. If you want to give some comment about what I've just said, please. Otherwise, I will open for...
Yeah, maybe very quick response to that. Thank you very much. I think it's a great question, and also you mentioned this Indian tradition of the dharma, or they call that some kind of duty or imperative, and also when we use English or Western vocabulary, we use this obligation, we use a duty. But in Chinese, we also have another word we call the 本分. It's something come from let's say, the being, let's say, the being as a father or as a son, or this kind of moral obligation does not come from my consent or my free will, but from some kind of my status. So that's, you may call that as a communal concept of rights or duty, but not actually, it's not one dimensional, only from community. It's interactive. And that I would say, we will use a Confucian term like appropriation or harmonious appropriation, and within the concept of community in our mind. Yeah, but actually it's interaction between the individual, like me, I, with my surrounding community. That's the point I want to argue. Yeah, but thank you for this question.
Thank you very much. Então, vamos passar agora para as questões. Oi? Em português. Ah, você vai fazer em português. Não quero.
Bom, a minha pergunta, então, eu faço em português e você traduz, porque acho que vai ser difícil para mim mesmo, com o meu par com inglês aqui.
Ele está traduzindo?
Plínio, você está traduzindo? Mas ele não ouve. Não ouve, tá. A minha pergunta é em relação à tradução de um conceito fundamental para Confúcio, que é o conceito xiao, que é traduzido por piedade filial. Certo? A minha pergunta não é só uma pergunta técnica sobre tradução, mas é uma pergunta que implica, tem implicações filosóficas e metafísicas mais complexas. Porque eu, particularmente, acho a tradução desse termo para piedade filial como uma das traduções mais delicadas na história das traduções do pensamento chinês para as línguas ocidentais, né? Porque piedade é um termo muito carregado dentro da tradição cristã, e para os críticos do cristianismo, o termo piedade é um termo muito carregado, um termo, entre aspas, até mesmo muito negativo, eu diria. Certo? E piedade filial parece ser uma expressão que rompe radicalmente com a própria perspectiva interrelacional do confucionismo, a própria perspectiva da tradição interrelacional ou relacional complementar. Então, a pergunta é se esse termo, e não é só esse termo, tem outros termos, mas a tradução do termo, desse termo, entende, para piedade filial, entende, não compromete filosoficamente, metafisicamente, todo o pensamento do Confúcio, quando traduzimos isso para as línguas ocidentais. E aí eu pergunto se não seria mais interessante traduzir por corresponsabilidade filial, certo? Que implica, entende, numa inter-relação e implica num caráter mútuo, e não numa numa ação do filho para com o pai ou do pai para com o filho, tem uma ação unilateral. Né? Então, quase todos os tradutores traduzem por piedade filial. E eu, particularmente, acho que é uma péssima escolha, certo? Mas isso pode ser decorrente também da minha dificuldade em entender o pensamento chinês, né? Mas vejo como problemático a tradução por piedade filial e que essa tradução traz consequências filosóficas mais graves.
Posso fazer uma pergunta só? Qual foi o título da palestra que ele enviou em inglês para essa expressão? Porque ele está pensando certamente em uma tradução em inglês.
Oi?
Qual foi o termo em inglês para a palestra? Nessa expressão, piedade filial.
É piedade filial.
Não, mas em inglês. Foi piety, filial piety.
Isso. Então, se corresponsabilidade filial não seria um termo que resolveria problemas filosóficos mais graves e romperia nesse sentido, com o caráter unilateral da expressão, e no Confúcio tem uma função interrelacional e não unilateral.
You can hear, Professor Wang?
Yes, I can hear, but
Okay.
I cannot understand.
Okay. I'll just briefly
Yes.
translate Professor Florentino's question. Okay. In fact, during your speech, something that came to my mind also, that in English, the title of your speech and the Confucian doctrine, you refer the word in English as pity. Is it correct? Piety, sorry.
Piety, yeah.
Piety, okay.
Because
piety. We translated here sometimes from the English, and therefore the meanings in English may not be necessarily corresponding to the Portuguese. But in any case, we presume it's a similar term in Portuguese, piedade, which would be your piety in English. So Professor Florentino is asking whether this is a good translation for this Chinese concept, which I don't know how to spell it or to say it, because he feels that it is somewhat loaded with some kind of subjective or unilateral aspects, and perhaps co-responsibility could be an alternative translation for this expression, filial piety. What is your opinion about that?
Okay. Yeah, just like some other the key terms in translation, we missed a lot of things. And the filial piety, the same thing, in Chinese we call the xiao. So I would say, as you mentioned, that in English, they might have a very strong, this one-dimensional meaning, just like, and also have a very strong the religious meaning behind these words. Yeah, piety, or you see. But in Chinese, xiao, yes, it's a relationship between parent and the son, especially the father and the son. But in Chinese, usually we say that it's also dimensional. And when we ask the children to fulfill this kind of responsibility or obligation to pay respect to their elderly parents or elderly brothers, all these kind of things, also ask another dimension. That means you should fulfill your duty as a father. So that's, I think, it's a two-dimensional or interactive relationship. Yeah, that's I would say one thing. And also that's related, as we explained, both me and Robin explained that the whole ontology behind it is some kind of contextual, some kind of relational, rather than like like a dichotomy of the self and other, subject and object, or the divine and that's a sacred, and this kind of dichological relations. So that's, I think, when we deal with this kind of translations, we need to be very careful, very careful. So that's when I can answer this question. And also, I think this point was explained by Roger Ames. He makes this very clear that the Chinese relationship always should be understood as the not one-dimensional, but bi-directional. So that's a point. I totally agree with Roger Ames about it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor. E aí? Tem mais questões? Ou termina? Tem mais uma questão, então, para a gente fechar?
Problem of translation had engaged me already before I came here. And I have tried to consider something about human right. And in order to avoid some confusion in my understanding, I would like to ask a primitive question. But before that, the chairman has used or pointed out the Indian word dharma. And just this word, dharma is used in Japan for the law. And human right, in the Japanese word human right, written in Sino-Japanese scripture, in this word, the word dharma is not used. Now, the key concept, key title of this conference is human right. And so far, my primitive question is, if in China, the word human right is written, so far as I suppose, no word for dharma. Dharma is used for law, as I have said, but in the word human right, then perhaps this word is written by two letters, human, and then the second word. That is my question. Human, in English we say human right. But in Chinese, on Japanese word, we say jin ken. I don't know the exact Chinese. Chen. And Mr. Speaker, the name of the speaker is James. And you have mentioned in the beginning of your talk that justice. The word justice is again written by two Chinese letters, while two letters, the first word is right, the correct, or in German to say richtig, and the second letter, that is already a problem of translation. And in my understanding, the word human right, when I think with or by German language, right is Recht, and law is Gesetz. And human right, that is already the problem. So my simple question is, how did they differentiate justice in Chinese word from the Chinese concept of right. So, in my understanding, there is still a kind of complication.
Yeah, I got your question. Your question is you're very, careful in especially taking, have some insights in this very trivial, very detailed translation of the terms like human rights. You see that we have two Chinese characters. I think the same with Japanese. Probably Chinese got this modern translation from Japan. Yeah, so that's we have two Chinese characters. One is a human, another we call the quan. But this, so far as I understand, for example, in the West, in the Western philosophy, justice should be understood in two ways. So one we call the justice as the legal rights. For example, if you violate someone's absolute right, or you see the judge make this a right. So this is a right that you mentioned, the German word like Recht. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's a distributive justice. That means fairness. So that's when we distribute the different kind of interest or things, we have to be fair. So that's two meanings, two basic meanings in the Western philosophy. But both of them just stick to some kind of individual citizen or individual person. So that's we don't care, we don't consider the roles they played or the status of their being in the social and economical or the political communities. So then, but we when we talk about this, I was Confucian tradition does not have this kind of concept of rights or justice. Yeah, with this the pure individual. When they talk about obligations, when we talk about privilege, when we talk about the rights, they're talking about rights of a father, the rights of a son, the rights of the member of that community with a specific status with it. So in light of this, when we talk about the justice of the filial justice, that's why I prefer to use the concept of appropriation rather than symmetry or asymmetry, this kind of vocabulary. Yeah. So that's a reason we want to provide different kind of perspective to see the issue. Of course, this social and political issue are the same, especially for the modern people. But we will see they might different kind of perspective may give us a different kind of understanding of the very nature of this very important term, such as justice or rights. And also another thing is that looks to me that, for example, this obligation or this filial justice based on, let's say, according to a liberal the point of view based on some kind of individual consent, and this consent just like a practice of our free will. But the question is, we don't ask if we make consent or not. We ask why we make consent. That means, we don't say that it is right because we consented. Yeah, therefore it's right. We should do it, rather than we say we should do it. It is right. Therefore, we may consent to it. So this free will may not taken as a foundation for us to make such kind of the final answer to these fundamental questions, according to Confucian tradition. So therefore, I would say ontologically they have some kind of different kind of presuppositions. And our job is to have to clarify what kind of presuppositions of these fundamental terms or concepts like justice or rights. That's, I think, a job for philosophers, especially if we work on this from a comparative philosophical perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Wang. And as we conclude this conference of yours, thank you for your speech, for your answering all our questions, and wish you a good night. Então, acabamos aqui a sessão. Essas duas conferências fecharam assim, um ciclo chinês aqui, né, do taoísmo e confucionismo.